Environment art. That's the fancy name I usually see get thrown around for art passing and level design. It just makes it sound more professional. You know what it is. Every texture, every piece of geometry, and every particle all coming together to create the environment art. This is of course an integral element of game design, and one with so much depth in modern game development that even environment lighting can be its own entire field on a level design team. The importance of environment art though is not just exclusive to the cutting edge of modern game design. Even here, in a nearly 20-year-old game, we still pour our hearts and souls into our art passing for our environments. Of course though, no one makes anything great without practice, research and time, even in this more limited environment, and the key word here is practice. So, on that exact note, I was browsing TF2maps on the day I was finishing up my Ivory Beta 3 devlog, and I stumbled into a little thread made by Paper Shadow, the unofficial Art Pass November challenge. This, in essence, was a thread dedicated to giving users a series of grey blockout levels every 4 days, to art pass as they see fit as a form of practice. This is in the same vein as online trends such as Inktober or the National Novel Writing Month, which is also in November funnily enough. Within the thread, there weren't any hard restrictions on what you could do with your entries, no prizes to be won, just the ability to show off what you can do, and the ability to refine your skills through constant practice. This thread instantly caught my attention, as it was very reminiscent of the old Art Pass Club threads which I absolutely adored. In the Art Pass Club threads, you'd be given a new space each week to detail to your heart's content. And I actually did quite a few of these in the past, but I never really ended up finishing any, so I only ever submitted one. So, we're now in December, November's been and gone, and at the time of writing, I've art passed every VMF in the thread that was handed out, besides from one. These were all really fun to do, even if I did each entry a bit out of order. So today, I want to go over my own entries in the November Art Pass Challenge. Think of this as my little archive. I'm going to show you how I detailed each block out, the concepts that went into it, the inspirations, and my general thoughts. I hope this can be seen as a little sneak peek behind the curtains on the thought that goes into TF2's level design, with some hopefully educational tidbits here and there. If anything, I hope you come out of this feeling pretty inspired yourself. But with that, let's start the countdown. In total, there's 6 entries to go through, so I'll try to make each one snappy. So to kick things off, let's start with the very first entry I did. Entry number 2. I know, that's a bit confusing, isn't it? I did say I started a bit out of order since I did end up seeing the thread late. Because I saw this the day I was finishing up my Ivory devlog, I had a key idea in mind for this one. Since the whole point of the thread is to be able to practice your art passing skills, why shouldn't I start by practicing my detailing for King of the Hill Ivory? For those not in the know, the whole intention behind Ivory is that it takes place in an American national park, with the core gameplay space intended to be a lot of close together touristy buildings and worker ones. And as I was midway through working and thinking about Ivory at the time, I had the perfect inspiration in mind. I wanted to art pass this building in the style of Logan Pass's Visitor Center. Embarrassingly enough, I only knew about this building since its exact framework was actually used as a location in Far Cry 5, except there it was of course called Whitetail Park Visitor Center. So with that inspiration, I got to work, and the end result is as shown. Now to break it down. In the original VMF, there wasn't any kind of active interior, but I decided to add one purely down to me just wanting to do some interior detailing, which is completely fine by the challenge's own standards. The details in this entry that I'd personally like to shout out is, first of all, this metal connector up here for the roof beamwork. The beamwork itself for the roof having these kind of like indents, the window frames being beveled so they look less blocky, as after all they're brushwork instead of actual models. And lastly, a shout out to the brushwork log awning outside of the main entrance. Despite me shouting out some specific elements of my art pass here, it doesn't mean that I'm 100% on the final result, as of course these are meant to be made in a short time frame. So, is there anything I'd change about this entry? Actually, yeah, a tiny bit. First of all, I'm not a fan of how the logs intersect here. I don't think in any way they should be going all the way through and connecting to the upper roof unless they also peeked through that. So I'm not a fan of what I did in this tiny spot, I just wouldn't have them cut through like that in the future. As an additional note, the white brick above the window frames, I'm not massive on either. It feels weird as a substitute, since the original reference images had this kind of worn, white painted wood. So using brick instead still feels off to me on a material basis, despite it providing, I think, the best substitute on a texture basis within TF2's base kit. That's basically everything for this first entry. Overall, I rate it cabin out of a full house. It's okay. Good detailing practice for Ivory. Since we started with the second Art Pass challenge entry, let's now jump back to the first, which incidentally is of course the second one I ended up art passing. I know my own ordering is confusing for me as well, but you know, we all have to live with it now. As this was the very first file to start the whole month-long challenge, it only made sense to me to start with TF2's most iconic and sensual level design theme, its abandoned, rickety, wooden American coal mine structures. And so, that's the theme I ended up going for with this entry. I think the theme actually lended itself incredibly well to the geometry of the original file in the first place, since it's very reminiscent of a lot of these old abandoned American coal mine buildings with their bridge-esque overhangs. I wanted to try and make this entry very gameplay first, and I think I achieved that goal, as despite the beamwork I produced now creating a line of sight through the original wall, the use of the chicken wire in the middle still means it serves the gameplay purpose of being able to block incoming fire for players to get the pickups behind it uninterrupted. I think this is actually my first time doing any kind of building in this architectural style for Team Fortress 2, which is crazy because I've been doing level design for this game for nearly a decade now as a hobby, but I just think I had other themes calling to me the whole time, especially due to my rampant London theme obsession. Can you tell I like London maps? Look at all these British, can you tell I like theme? Overall, there's very little I'd end up changing about this entry really. I'm actually quite happy with it, despite it being relatively basic, but that's probably what lends me to be more favourable to it in the first place. I do have to call out the fact that I love being able to make off-the-grid rotating beamwork for these kind of buildings. It really makes the building feel more natural and shabby in its construction, and less like a bunch of blocks thrown together in a level editor, even though that's exactly what it is really. But yeah, very solid entry. Honestly, I think it's probably the most solid one that I've ended up doing, but the style is so explored by this point that I don't think that's as large of an accomplishment as I'd like it to be. But without further delay, let's move on to the next one. Now for the third entry, which actually marks us being in the correct order of the entries from their releases. This won't last for too long as I will end up skipping an entry, but appreciate the lack of confusion while it's here, it's a temporary thing. With this entry, I really locked down the idea that I wanted to do a different setting and theme for each and every single entry I'd end up doing. And this time, I felt pretty set on just getting my usual England theme out of the way. Despite the fact that I wanted to lock down a British theme though, the original file really provided a challenge for me. I wasn't really sure on how to adapt it visually, so I did some brief research and decided to wait. I could make it a pier. I grabbed some images with some really cool beamwork and I instantly got to work. This entry is definitely a set piece environment. This would never work in gameplay. And goodness me, did I suffer from scope creep. Turns out, spending super long on metal beams, getting the texture work to align, and working on the tiny high ground shack the original file provides means you don't have time to make the rest of the pier? Crazy, I know, but yeah, I got carried away. Honestly, for this entry, I'm not that big of a fan of how it turned out. I got the baseline down and I just kinda had to roll with what I ended up making. I really feel like I can make this amazing with some iteration work, some redesigns here and there, and just in general, more time. But for the limited time that these Art Pass challenge entries are meant to be produced in, and the fact that I also have other things to be working on, it's okay enough for now. So, on that pretty sour note, what would I change about this anyway, since I claim to not be over keen on it overall? Well, firstly, the beamwork itself has me screaming. Because it turns out the texture I was using for the most part actually has a bump map to make it look like corrugated metal, which is why it has these weird lightning bug looking black stripes going down the texture on all sides. So I applied this texture, assuming it would just be a flat piece of metal, which was the visual intention. But nope, corrugated metal, yay! Also, as a tiny note, I made these evil brushwork roof beams for the shacks as supports using evil vertex pools. These looked completely fine in the editor and didn't scream any errors at me while I was compiling. But it turns out the compile really didn't like the beams, so the vertexes became warped once actually rendered in game. The worst part is, I had a test compile of this entry before my final one, so I could have caught this issue and fixed it there and then if I had noticed it. But for whatever reason, yeah, the brushwork is only fine on one side and then completely mutilated on the other, despite being the same vertex pools, just flipped. Source jank will never cease to amaze me. I don't know why I did this. But that's enough of that. On to the next entry now. That's right. Entry number 5. I skipped 4 because I have no idea what to do with this roof shape. Look at it, it's evil! Flat in the middle, angled on the sides. I was honestly just confused. To be fair, this is a very normal roof shape for TF2 buildings, but I don't like to make anything without pulling from some source of visual inspiration, and I just could not find anything like this roof to really fire off my neurons, so I left it for the time being and I still haven't done it. But yeah. For entry number 5, the buildings felt a little bit awkward for me position wise, so I decided to go with a Scottish town theme. So I made the 90-degree building into a tiny little adobe house, and the angled 45-degree building into a metal shack used as a boathouse and or a storage room. I wanted to do this actually as a little test for my future attack defense map, Deadlock, which I really want to set in a little Scottish town. But honestly, I'm not massive on how this detail test turned out, so I'll probably have to evolve my style much further for my future map. To be fair, the main building in this entry is tiny anyway compared to what I want to end up producing, and if all goes according to plan, I should be able to produce some custom brick and adobe materials for what I want to end up doing. But yeah, I'm not massive on my attempt for this entry, I'm just not a big fan of the metal shack really. Something about it really irks me. The thickness of the walls, its general composition, its roof. I don't really know what it is, but I dislike it. Bad building. Bad building. Meanwhile, the adobe building, I feel like I'd like a lot more if it wasn't so small and limited. I could make something pretty cool in the style if only it was bigger, but this teeny little rush the original VMF provided really did not leave me with a lot of room for this style. Regardless, I just wanted to see if this would work at the scale, and it didn't. Can't say I didn't try. Now to entry number 6. Hey, Have you ever heard of Deadlock? Deadlock? The new Valve game? Well, this entry has nothing to do with that. Welcome to entry number 6. I went really overboard with this entry. So much so that I spent way too long on it, did color correction and a 3D skybox. I went absolutely insane. But as you can clearly see, I wanted to go for a New York-esque urban style, and that's what I ended up going with. Of which the style was definitely in no way inspired by the architecture of another work-in-progress Valve game, which also takes place in New York. Not at all. Why would I do that? That'd be weird. This was a really fun entry to do. Everything from the window trims to the windows themselves, and even the sign out front are all brushwork, with nicely aligned textures to create the level of detail I wanted. Fun fact for the behind the scenes of this entry, I was originally going to use the London Asset Pack windows, until I decided the frames would look much better and contrast less from the stone detailing if they were grey rather than white, hence why I made metal brush ones. I don't just do these things to myself because I want myself to suffer, it looks nicer, I think it looks nicer. Overall, I'm really happy with this entry, especially the interior, as I used my custom wood ceiling textures, wallpaper textures, and made some really nice trims. Then I used the stock TF2 stain textures to really make the wallpaper look worn and rugged as I would do in late 1960s New York. At most, if I was going to give this entry any feedback, I wish I put more detail into the roof beams. These in Deadlock are usually a lot more ornate, just like they are on real New York buildings, with a lot more shape to them and various sizes based on where the support beams are. But I just quickly threw these ones together and then added them to all the sides of the building as a quick last minute finisher. Also, here's like some green cows in a circle, probably not inspired by anything. You could probably kill them for currency, I don't know, this is just a guess. On to entry number 7. And now for the final entry. Entry number 7. The final one I did, since I never did get back around to doing the 4th one. That roof is going to continue to haunt me forever. To close out this whole Art Pass challenge, I wanted to do a theme I wanted to take a jab at for a unnamed future project, but I've never really attempted it. A British cathedral. Sure, you could say that this is me reusing a theme, since this is the 3rd British Art Pass I've done so far throughout this whole Art Pass challenge. But, no, that's my whole argument against you. I don't have anything else. This entry was another case of scope creep, just like the 3rd and 6th entries, but I mean, it's the final one. I had to, you know, it was only fair to go out with a proper bang. In all fairness, that scope creep was really just in scale anyway, alongside my even more ornate brushwork windows, which are an even larger step up from the ones I just made in the 6th entry. Trust me, if I had more time to my hands, these windows would go even crazier. But this level of detail I'm fine with as a baseline, it's a good starting point. Some cool minor little details for this entry involve the stairs outside being fairly rugged and ruined, the interior pillar designs, and honestly just the way I segmented the interior to keep the original VMFs room size while making it feel like a long hallway due to the extensive out of bounds. Also worth noting is this little memorial thingy-mabob right outside the main entrance. In the original VMF this was just a block, and I think I did a good job of translating it into a detail which makes sense within the space, but only using mostly brushwork while keeping its original size. All in all, I'm pretty happy with this entry. As mentioned, I would have put a lot more detail into this if I had the time, as a lot of the cathedral is just the same geometry copy and pasted over and over. But besides that tiny tidbit which is very vague, what else would I change? Well, there is one really big missing element. Can you by any chance spot it? It's really frustrating me. I'll give you some time with it. I'll let you think about it. It's towerless. I made a towerless cathedral. I've never felt so ashamed, honestly. I just didn't have the time to make a tower, and everyone else I've talked to seems to believe it looks fine without it. But not me. It's actually really annoying to me that it's towerless. It just looks so wrong once you mentally acknowledge it. Hopefully I do something with the style in the future, but that's it for entry number 7 really. I'm actually quite happy with it all things considered, but it is just a baseline. And now for the outro. Hello everyone! Hopefully I did in fact upload this video in December. I hope you had a lovely Christmas and you're ready for the new year. I'm readying up for it personally, and finishing this is just one more step in that process. I hope you enjoyed me lightly covering my art passes. With any luck, the practice I've made here will show through in my future work. If you want to check out the thread yourself, which has everyone else's submissions in and my own BSPs, you can find the thread in the description. I'd like to thank Paper Shadow for of course making the thread. And I do hope there'll be another November Art Pass Challenge thread in the next year. Both so I can see if I've improved in that amount of time, but also so I get to see once again what crazy things everyone else manages to make. That's really all I have to say for this outro. I'll see you in the next video, which may be a devlog, it may not, who really knows. All I know is the next year is going to have a lot of technical issues I need to fix, so bear with me. Later everyone!